Midlife isn't a crisis, it's a collision. Identities shift, relationships change, bodies rebel, and the life you built suddenly demands a rewrite. But what if, instead of pretending everything is fine, we finally had a space for radical honesty? Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies behind living a longer, healthier, and more purposeful life. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, an exercise physiologist with a passion for making science simple and life better as we age. In this episode, we explore one of the most misunderstood and under-discussed stages of the human journey, midlife, especially for women. And to help us unpack the physical, emotional, and identity upheaval of this season, we're joined by Angela Burk, author of Real Girl's Guide to Midlife. Whether you're navigating midlife yourself or walking along someone who is, today's conversation will shine a light on what's happening beneath the surface and how to move through it with clarity and self-authority. Angela, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. You describe midlife as kind of an identity upheaval. What was the moment you realized I need to write this book?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I love your podcast, so it's thrilling for me to be joining you today. I think what prompted me to write the book, actually, it was when I turned 35, to be honest with you. So I had, at that point, I was going through a lot of transitions. I had 2 children. I was relatively newly married. I was at kind of a pivotal point in my career where I was sort of trying to decide what path I wanted to go down. And then I noticed that a lot of my internal systems were starting to shift. And I was looking around and nobody was talking about these things. Not my friends, not my mother, who was only 19 years older than me. Nobody was talking. And so I started to sketch out this book, which at the time was going to be called The Real Girl's Guide to Over 35. And I had a red folder and chapter outlines and key questions. I sort of had a structure in mind, and I had a list of topics that I was struggling with, and sort of feeling like if I was struggling and I had no answers, surely other women were struggling as well. And then, like a lot of things, it figuratively and literally got buried. And what happened was December of 24, I had the good fortune of being able to retire from my marketing career. And in cleaning out my desk, I found the folder. Literally found the folder. So I opened it. And as I was reading through a lot of the topics, I realized, yeah, some of them had changed, but that new sense of transition, I was feeling again. And then I stopped and I was auditing my girlfriends and the kinds of conversations we were having. And again, I was like, nobody's talking about this stuff. And so that's what prompted me this past April to go, you know what? I'm going to write this book. Only I can't call it 35 anymore. But there's something shifting in what's happening. And, yes, there's a lot of conversations that are starting. I see celebrities and other influencers, doctors talking about these things, but I needed perspectives that related to me. I'm just a real girl trying to figure this stuff out, and wanting a platform to do it. And that's what started it.
So why do you think midlife has been so culturally invisible, especially for women?
Yeah. I think that there are a few reasons, right? I think a lot of it is probably what's been modeled for us. I can certainly talk for me, and in a lot of the women that I spoke to and the experts that I spoke to in building the book, we women are taught to kind of keep the peace, right? We are taught to be the calm providers. We don't make waves. We try to stay quiet and stay small and be peaceful. And for me, and again, a lot of the women that I talked to, those stories sort of defined who I was. They defined how we see the world. They defined how we see ourselves in the world. And I think with that comes this belief and understanding that our pleasure, our needs, our desires don't come first. That we're not entitled to want more, that in some cases we might not think we deserve more. And so I think it is this sort of internal dialogue, some modeling that we've seen, and then how we absorb that, and then how we show up in our own lives, that creates this sort of transition and this angsty feeling of, hey, I don't want to do this for the rest of my time. I don't want to spend the rest of my years, hopefully a lot, more decades, being this person. Something's got to shift.
So how many of those shifts do you think we see in our lifetime, particularly for women?
Well, I think it's different for all of us, right? I think it's different for all of us, but I think that there are a lot of shifts, right? When you go through identity shifts, right? So for some of us as women, we go from being a daughter to being a partner or a wife. That's a big shift. We go from being a dependent of our parents, or in some cases, relationships that we become a part of, to then having to provide. We go from being a solo carer of ourselves or maybe people around us to being a mother or a caregiver. And then if you take those are, environmental, circumstantial. And then for women, layer on the biological changes, which start when we're young. We begin menstruating. I don't know how your listeners feel about some of this talk, but we're going to get real. You start there. And for some of us, decades of your life, you're going through a series of hormonal shifts that are massive. And I think so. The volume of these transitions is high, coupled with the biological transitions, which don't stop, by the way. Like, you don't get to end, you're not postmenopausal, and you don't get to turn in your card and then you live on easy street. There's things that we have to still pay attention to and are happening in our bodies. And I also think that a lot of what happens is our lives start to shift, and I think for me personally, and for a lot of the women that I spoke to in the book, the signs were present, but I personally just wasn't seeing them. You either start to identify hey, I don't feel like my life is my own anymore. I'm starting to do things out of obligation, not out of desire. I'm starting to not feel present in what is happening. I'm living on the edges of my own life. And these signs are there. But I know when you're in the thick of life, career, parenting, relationships, those signs become a lot harder to spot.
So you talk about grieving past selves. What does that grief look like in real life, and how can someone honor it?
Well, again, I think it looks different for a lot of different women, right? That grief can show up in, how we see ourselves. The grief can show up in our circumstances, right? I've talked to a lot of women who at this age are going through changes, divorcing after marriages that existed for 30 years. Kids are leaving the home, right? You're used to parenting little kids. All of a sudden you've got adults and your kids are leaving. Careers that are changing either by choice or by circumstance. And I think what is so powerful about the concept of grief, and let me just also go back and say, for some of us, it's also just the physical identity. I don't have the same look as I did when I was 25. I don't have the same body that I had when I was 25. Some of the things that I used to do when I was younger, like run half marathons, run marathons, I would do it in I was on easy street. Things are becoming harder now. I have to take care of my body, and there's new aches and new pains. So the grief can show up in a lot of different ways. And I think it starts, though, by first acknowledging it and then moving to acceptance. And part of acknowledging it is just confronting the things that are happening. And then I think it further goes on to, adopt a mindset that says grief is not necessarily a failure. It's just something different. Change is not a failure. It's just something different. And then kind of moving through, okay, if I acknowledge it and I give it a name and I can give myself the mindset that says it's not a failure, it's a change, and I can accept my circumstance. Now, what do I want to do differently? And it's transitioning into action. And I think some of us, again, I saw this theme reflected from the experts and the women I talked to in the book, that moving to action could be very overwhelming. Because it's oh my God, I don't know what to do. Where do I start? Or, oh, I have to have everything perfectly lined up. And really, I don't think you do. It's just, it can start small, and you don't have to have the perfect plan, but you have to begin.
If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend, because aging is something we're all doing, and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you, and now back to the podcast. So divorce and dating in midlife, they obviously bring a unique set of challenges. I actually was in my early 40s before I met my wife and had our first kid.
Yeah.
So what surprised you the most in your own journey or in the stories that women have shared with you?
Yeah, well, I'll reflect my own journey. So a lot of things that happened for me. So I really only had a few significant relationships in my life. I had a boyfriend out of high school. I had a boyfriend in my mid-20s, and then I met my ex-husband. So I didn't have a lot of experience. But when my marriage ended, I was 45, and I was going through transitioning myself and my boys into this new world of single motherhood. I was in the throes at that time. I didn't know it because I didn't have the language to apply to it, but I was on the cusp of entering full menopause and then exiting, so becoming postmenopausal. And I was just, one of the earliest blogs. So in addition to the book, I launched a blog in June. One of the earliest blogs I wrote was something I called the Rage Years, my mom's apology tour, because at that time when my boys needed stability, I was just not giving them that. I was just, because I was going through all these transitions. But what I realized in that period was I didn't know enough about myself. I didn't understand what I liked. And you can apply that to a lot of different parts of my life, but like pleasure, I didn't have a relationship with these topics myself. So how could I bring expectations onto a new partner if I didn't even understand myself first? So it was really important to me that I accepted the fact that I didn't get it. I didn't know what brought me pleasure. I write about in my book a story of my first vibrator, in my late 40s, because I just didn't understand myself. But what I realized and what I've seen play out with the women that I've spoken to for the book is you almost have to suspend any playbook or rules that you thought existed when you were younger. For me, that turned up into meeting a man who lives in Australia and I live in California. There's no playbook for that. And it also, with that came a mindset, which was very different for me. And that was, I always believed I needed to have everything perfectly lined up. And I needed to have contingency plans for every possible scenario that could go wrong. And then I met this man. And within a couple of months after meeting, we had a conversation. He's like, look, I don't know how this is going to work. And very unlike me, I replied with, I don't think we have to have all the answers. Let's just see where it goes. I look back at that time and go, who said that? Because that was not how I lived my life. So what I've seen play out is this notion of understanding ourselves and then spending time to know who we are, what are the things we like, what are the things we don't like, experimenting with ourselves, then kind of suspending a rule book that says, hey, dating, relationships, they don't have to look like they did when you were 20s and 30s. And you might not even find a playbook for it, and being open to that. And then third, it is this idea of maybe needing to have all the answers is limiting. Maybe just being present and being open and going, look, I'm just going to see where this stuff goes these are the keys to embracing something new and different, that if I went into this with my old mindset, I wouldn't have given my man a second look. Because I would have been like, oh, you live in Australia, see ya. This is ridiculous. What am I doing? So that's what I've seen play out. And I've seen it play out with the women who've shared their stories and also with the experts that I've talked to. And I don't know, has that been your experience, or was it different for you?
I think it's certainly different for men than it is for women, because, we have different social norms. Yeah. And, I guess, the men's social norms have shifted a lot more probably in the last 10 years with just the shift in society. You think of the Me Too movement and things like that, and how, comedy has changed. I grew up, Porky's, all these really debauchery kind of sophomoric movies that were my favorites. And now I can't even enjoy them with my kids, or my wife thinks I'm bizarre that I even like those things.
Right.
So I do think it's very different. And, I think men go through different changes than women do. I mean, we obviously still have the career aspects, but our careers and parenthood is somewhat separate, I think, than it is for women. I think it's a lot more challenging for women than it is for men as these changes happen. As we get older, society looks at us differently. It's not about looks anymore. It's more about money and who you're with, and those kind of appearances. And from a hormonal standpoint, we have this gradual decline in testosterone, but it's not this massive upheaval that women have to experience when they go through perimenopause and menopause. And so I think it's very different, and I think it's a bit more slow changing in terms of the norms than it is for women. And one question I was going to ask you is, do you feel like the playbook for women is almost constantly changing? Because 20 years ago, you meet a man from Australia, there's no way that's even going to happen because there's no real connection. I mean, what are you going to, call on your landline, every night to chat? Now we have cell phones, we have FaceTime, we have, much easier means of communicating and being relational. And we're also a bit more used to being relational virtually. I have tons of friends that I have yet to meet in person.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've met them through Facebook and other friends that have introduced us. And, we, converse, either whether it's a Zoom call or just email and things like that. And so relationships are much, much different. And they're going to be different in 5 years. And so, you don't have daughters, but, for your son's girlfriends and wives and things like that, it's going to be a lot different for them than it was for you, and certainly for your mother. My mother as well, went through, very different experiences. So it's, I feel like for women, it's a bit harder because society is a lot harder on women than they are on men. And society is changing so rapidly that it makes it that much more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think, take the example of just electronic communication, right? The idea of entertaining a relationship with somebody who lives in a different hemisphere is super easy now because there's FaceTime, there's Zoom, there's text, there's, all the things that kept us connected that still keep us connected when we're not physically together. And it also, required me to get a little bit creative and probably not all that comfortable. You have to do things to keep it spicy. And so, is there an occasional panty pick? Like, I never would have done that when I was in my 20s or 30s. Like, it just wouldn't happen.
Too much information for this gentle podcast.
I know. But so I do think that the playbook has changed, and it's made it a lot easier. I think part of that, though, comes with this understanding that as a woman, we can control how we want to show up and the type of relationship we want. Like, and that ability to take control and to not be the small, quiet voice, and to not be the peacekeeper, and to raise our hand and say, no, I want more. I deserve more. And I'm going to do the things to get it. Like that's a different mindset, certainly, than my mom, even at 19 years older than me, had when she was in her 20s and 30s and 40s. So I think that a little bit of the playbook's changing. The mindset's different, for sure. And I think the other difference is the kind of, and I do agree with you that society is very hard on women, for sure. But I also think that we are getting a lot more educated. I'm having, even within the last 6 or 9 months, I'm having very different conversations with my own doctor, as an example, because of what I'm learning than I did in my 20s and 30s and 40s. And that is helpful, right? When I was kind of going through my hormonal change, the idea of taking hormones, as an example, was completely off the table. It was the early 2000s. A lot of the studies were coming out. My mom was like, absolutely don't do it. My doctor was like, don't do it. And so I didn't. And now I'm a lot more educated, where I feel like I can even have a conversation that looks very different with my doctor. And that's a big change for a lot of us at this point. We don't have to sort of white knuckle alone through some of these changes, right? And it's giving us the language and the information to have different conversations and to not just sort of let everything that's happening to us happen without, questioning it.
Yeah, we had Amy Alcon on, I'm trying to think how long ago. It was earlier this past season, and she wrote the book Going Menopausal.
I love that title.
Yeah, and so she talked about the struggles of trying to get her doctor to recognize her needs when the medical standards were so off from what the science was really saying, and she had to really push and push and push. And, so it's not just women having to be educated themselves, but we're also having to educate our physicians and society as a whole. And it's challenging.
Yeah, it's so true. Like a lot of the women that I talk to, I've even had this experience where, I've sat in the doctor's office and I've talked about symptoms, and you sort of get the shoulder shrug. Like, sorry, I know that's really not fun. Or I've talked to so many women who, at the very earliest signs that something was shifting hormonally, their doctor would throw out a prescription for an antidepressant. And it's like, well, wait a second. Are we just going to make that leap immediately? Is there maybe something else that's going on? And so I think that our doctors aren't educated as they should be. And even our partners, right? Like, if we don't know what's happening to us, how do we expect our partners, in some cases, to know?
We'll take a quick pause to acknowledge the affiliate brands that help make this podcast possible. These aren't sponsors, and no one pays for placement. But when you use our affiliate links, it supports the mission of the Aging Well podcast. One partner I've chosen after careful vetting is Berkeley Life, known for their nitric oxide support products. I value their commitment to quality, testing, and education around vascular wellness, and I use their products myself. If you'd like to support the show and explore Berkeley Life for your own health journey, you'll find a link in the episode description. All right, so Angela, after a little bit of technical difficulties, we're back. So I don't know how much of this is going to show up to the viewers and the listeners, but for those who might be noticing a little bit different camera angles and a sudden jump in the audio, we apologize for that. Little technical difficulties, but kind of moving on, parenting teens or adult children, as yours are kind of bridging into that adulthood as are mine, while navigating your own transition can feel overwhelming. What guidance can you give to parents and women in that situation?
Yeah, it's a real shift for sure. And I think some of the guidance that I talk about in the book and I've written about in the blog is, number one, you kind of have to acknowledge that it's going to be different. Number two, I think, letting go of control and realizing that our kids are going to make decisions and make life choices that we might not agree with. And we can fight the tide, or we can be present and, not miss a moment of whatever their journeys are going to look like. And I think, I think the third one is, when I feel like I'm at my most difficult phase or place with my kids, sometimes I just get very vulnerable and I tell them, like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I've not had to parent adults before, and I'm working this out with you, and let's do it together. And so I in talking to parenting experts and talking to women, and quite honestly, men as well, going through some of these transitions, it starts with just acknowledging and accepting and making a conscious decision that, we can fight the forces or we can be present. And, for my boys, each of them are 3 different humans. They respond to different in different ways. They have different love languages. It's, they're just 3 individuals, and I have to meet them where they are and, and get a little vulnerable.
Great advice.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
So you're not in a situation of blended families, but I'm sure you've interviewed and talked to a lot of women and individuals who are in those situations. So blended families are incredibly common in our day and age, but we rarely discuss those with any level of honesty. So what are some myths that you would like to dismantle when it comes to blended families?
Well, so I actually am part of a blended family. My partner, my fiance, who lives in Australia, he has 4 children. I have 3, so that makes a staggering number together. And I was also a child of a blended family with my father and my stepmom, who went on to have 2 children after my parents divorced. And in talking to women and in talking to experts, I think a lot of the myths, I would say, and also the advice that seems to be really resonant is, the idea that blending a family is going to look perfect and it's going to be seamless and easy is a myth. Again, when you blend traditions and norms and expectations and so many humans who come to any kind of interaction with their own baggage and their own beliefs, it's very hard to make it seamless and smooth. So I think that that's sort of one myth. I think the next myth is to kind of, again, be honest and vulnerable. Like if something's not working out, call it out. And, hey, I don't have all the answers. Hey, I don't know what's happening, but I'm sensing a shift. And then I think the third element is, it's not necessarily something that we as individuals have to solve on our own. I think for us women, and for many of us, we sort of take the job of problem solver to heart, especially when you're a parent, right? I feel like some days I'm the chief finder of things that are lost or misplaced. I'm the chief problem solver. I'm the chief unsticking the things that get stuck. And there are a lot of things in blending families where I can't solve the problem. And it's kind of releasing control over that and just sort of saying, like, look, if we acknowledge that something's not working, as an example, call it out. And if we want to solve it, it's going to take more than me coming to the table to do that. And I can't have all the answers.
Good advice there as well.
Oh, thank
you.
you.
Just chock full of them today.
Well, look at that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think the other thing I'll say is, like, even through the writing of this book, right? So I started the writing of this book in April, and here we are. And I'm, close to publishing it. And I feel that my mindset is shifted in so many important and powerful ways, but I'm not always perfect. Some of the same internal stories that I held for decades of my life still creep up. Many of the same fears or uncertainties that I thought I felt and dealt with still creep up. But what I noticed is that I'm able to short circuit them now, because I've spent so much time just sort of calling them out, coming up with tools to help me move through them, and then taking action. So I don't spend as much time in maybe some of these negative spaces as I used to, because I'm better equipped now. So I can't say that I'm perfect, but I can short circuit some of this stuff. So that's where I feel like, I've gotten a lot wiser. And I also think that through, and some of it could be hormonal, but there are things that I used to wallow a lot over that I don't wallow about now. And I'm very protective of who I give my time to, who I give my attention to, who I give my emotion to, than I think I was when I was younger. And so I'm preserving these reserves, right? You get to a certain point and we don't have a lot of reserves for patience or for nonsense or for, bad behavior. And so I'm a lot more discerning now because I just don't have a lot of reserves.
So speaking of wallowing, many women reach midlife feeling a loss of purpose after decades of caregiving, career building, or whatever their identity roles might be. How can they begin redefining what's next?
Well, I think it's really I think it starts with identifying what it is we're feeling, and then labeling it, like giving the thing a name, and then taking some action, right? And the way, whether it's finding peace with a circumstance that changed, or accepting that something that you thought was going to be true in your life has come to an end or has shifted. Really, for me, it started with a lot of the stories that I told myself, that I wasn't enough, that I didn't deserve more, that I didn't deserve to be happy. And I just had to call those things out. And then I just started doing. And it's not like I needed a perfect plan. Another one of the things I noticed for me personally, and for a lot of women that I interviewed, was this idea of saying no. as an example, right? A lot of us are trained to say no, and then what comes after it? A huge essay, a dissertation on why I have to not do the thing. And so making small changes, for me, if I'm tired or I need help, I say it. I need help. That's 3 words, right? I don't agree. 3 words, very short sentences, or no, period. And trying those things out and practicing them. Like, they feel really good. So it's not a perfect plan. It's not a well-designed process. It's not, everything that's perfectly tied up in a bow, but it's something in my life is not feeling good. I have to accept it and not view it as a failure. And what am I going to do differently? I'm going to make one small change. And if your pattern is, I'm tired of having to be everything to everybody, I'm going to start saying no. Try just saying no. It's a full sentence. So I think it's bridging the thought to the acceptance. It's reframing the story. And then it's taking just begin. Do something small.
Those little baby steps that we talk about a lot on this podcast.
Totally. And I think that's the thing that can get overwhelming for people. It is this, wow, I have to have every answer to every question, and I have to be able to take every step. And I don't think it is. It's just begin. And, a lot of what I talk about in the book is I kind of ended on this notion of a manifesto, right? A personal contract that we're going to make to ourselves. And, for me, it is like, what am I going to let go of? What do I want to reclaim? And then saying what I need out loud. And in those very short sentences, I'm not available. I don't agree. I need a break. No. And then just beginning. And you write it it's like a personal contract with yourself, right?
Yeah, so you have a lot of good 3-word sentences, and I can think of a few more that probably wouldn't be appropriate for the podcast. When you get in those most dire situations. But
I mean, totally true. And and it just doesn't, and I think the other thing is this idea that, taking up space means I have to dismantle my whole life. Taking up space means I have to, rewrite every pattern of behavior at once. It just doesn't. It can start with a sentence.
So you discuss money and the identities that women inherit along with that. What insights have you found about financial empowerment in this stage?
I think, so there were a few insights. A couple of them came from some experts that I talked to, which, are detailed in the book. But for me personally, a couple of the insights that I found were, I and a lot of women sort of grew up with a very different relationship with money. For me, money was protection. It was the thing that would keep me safe if the proverbial other shoe dropped. And so I sort of equated money with this idea that I had to have it, not that I had to spend it, but I needed to keep it. And I needed to kind of build this fortress around myself. And I needed to be sure that I could protect myself if any change happened in my life through financial security. And so I had a mindset of not abundance, of scarcity. And something in me shifted. It shifted when I hit kind of 50. I emerged from my divorce. I realized that I had enough of that to sustain my life, and that I deserved things in my life out of abundance, not out of protection. And there's a story that I write about where about a year ago, I bought myself a car. I had been driving the same car for 15 years. It had almost 300,000 miles on it. And I convinced myself I was just going to drive it until it died. I decided that I wanted to buy a car, and I didn't buy a safe car. I didn't buy, the used car from a lot that, required no payment. I bought myself a car, and I ended up writing a check for that car. And I prepared, so I did it on a day. The next morning I woke up and I thought, I've got to mentally brace myself. I'm going to walk into the garage and I'm going to see this car and I'm going to feel a flood of remorse and guilt. Like, what am I doing? And this money that I should have kept it. And what if these 17 things happen in my life and I'm not ready? And I walked into the garage and I looked at the car and I was like, turns out I deserve that car. And I had no guilt and no remorse. I shut the door and I enjoy every time I drive the car. because I deserve it. So there is, and every woman, every person has a different circumstance. So I can't, claim that the relationship with money looks the same for each of us. But I can tell you the need that I personally had for a big chunk of my life to get it, and then to build a fortress around myself, because I felt like I needed to be prepared financially for any situation that might change in my life. And not having that made me feel really unstable. And I feel less unstable now, partially too, because I have confidence in myself, because I know that I will do the things I need to do to always take care of myself and my family. And I now have enough decades of run rate and proof that I can do it. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it makes perfect sense. And I'm wondering, is this a process that all women go through, or is it a bit more of a product of having gone through a divorce and that insecurity that comes following that? Because my wife kind of went through the same thing. She was married before as well. And it's taken, we're still in that kind of same situation. She just got a new car because I totaled hers, and it wasn't my fault that I totaled it. Somebody jumped into my lane, and it was dark, and I never saw the car. And
you were okay,
else.
Obviously.
Oh yeah, I'm fine. Okay. But her car didn't make it through. So and it didn't seem that damaged, but it was enough to total the vehicle. And so she had to go out and get a new car. And, just I could see the pain in her eyes as we wrote the check for the down payment. It's like, relax, we can afford this. It's fine. And she was going through a transition too. She had lost her job through a resizing, or whatever they wanted to call it. It's a company that's probably rapidly on the decline. And she had gotten a new job, but she hadn't officially started it. So it's this whole nervousness of, I'm kind of between jobs, and, we go and we're just kind of looking because credit wise, they're, we thought, well, we won't be able to buy a car until she's had that job and signed on the dotted line. And they're like, oh no, it doesn't matter. Your credit's good enough. You're fine. Oh, it's okay. So we came home with a car. Yeah. And she was really, really nervous about signing that. And it's like, I've seen this in her throughout our marriage. And I don't know if it's a product of just, natural insecurity, or if it's a product of having gone through the divorce and kind of having to be secure for herself.
Yeah, I think it probably looks a little bit different for different women depending on their circumstance. But I have found that there is a kind of a thread when it comes to some sort of life transition, right? Whether that's the ending of a marriage or a relationship, whether that's a significant job change, whether it's a health change or significant kind of health catastrophic event, whether it's the loss of a parent, whether it's, I talked to one woman who lost her home in a hurricane, and it was like she was starting over. And feeling wildly out of her element on what to do and where to start in kind of working through that process, in addition to worrying about the financial aspect of how she was going to rebuild. So I think for some of us, it is driven by circumstance, many of which are not in our control. I think it could also be driven by the way we grew up and the programming that we had, the relationship with money that our parents had or our family had, and what we modeled from that. And I think the other element that I write about in the book as well is, when you become a parent or you're in a relationship and you have to think about your mortality, and those things involve writing a will and doing all the things, I put that off for a long time because I was afraid of it tempting the universe in some way. That the minute I wrote something down on paper, it was going to open up this, big box of catastrophes, and I was not going to be able to handle them. And I had to get to this point where what I realized was I owed my children peace more than I had to protect my own fear. And that was the catalyst for me to do the thing I needed to do, but I did it very late. And I had a lot of friends who were like, what do you mean you don't have a will? And I was like, well, I can't, I'm too afraid. And so I think a lot of this, for me and for a lot of women, is often rooted in this, maybe a mindset of fear and always needing to be prepared and always, having contingency plans for the worst case scenarios, instead of sort of going, okay, Like, I'm in this place. I can be present right now. And I know that I will work through whatever comes my way. And it's hard. And it's hard when you're doing that through a variety of transitions as well. So, yeah, I do think it looks a little bit different. But I think divorce is a huge catalyst for a lot of us, where you just feel unstable.
Yeah, and we hear a lot about women solo aging. And how can someone approach it with agency rather than fear?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good one. And I think it is this idea that, accepting that a mindset of your circumstance as being bad, it's not bad. It's different. And different doesn't have to be bad. And I think that that's hard for some of us who maybe find ourselves alone or find ourselves living as we age in a life that maybe we didn't envision. So I think it starts with kind of this belief that different is not bad. It's just different. Releasing some of the guilt and shame that comes with a lot of circumstances and how we feel. Allowing ourselves to find what works for us. Because we're not being graded, right? You're not being graded if you're doing aging alone or aging in a different circumstances, right or wrong. It's just how you're doing it. And I do think it's this idea, there's a little bit that I've seen play out in the law of attraction, right? Once we start thinking differently, behaving differently, presenting ourselves differently, I have found that then I attract people who often mirror that, or who bring something that I want to mirror. And I've seen that play out. And so the idea of agency starts with acceptance, releasing the label of bad or good, and understanding that how you age, the decisions that you make, you're not going to be graded on. There is no right or wrong. And then I think that then helps releasing some of that guilt and shame and fear that can kind of come with it.
So as we dismiss the idea of a grading rubric for aging well, how do you go about defining aging well?
I mean, I think it starts with, for me, I want to be the best Angela I could be. Right. And I know that the best Angela I am today might not look like the same Angela that I'm going to be in 10 years. But my decisions are rooted in that. My decisions are rooted in the fact that I get to choose what I do, how I do it, what I don't do. I'm not going to listen to somebody else tell me like I should be getting Botox and I should be coloring my hair and I should be doing, 17,000, weight repetitions and taking 19,000 supplements. Like, I get to choose what I do. And that's important to me. And I think for me, the other element of this is it's about longevity, right? I really hope I have a few more decades on this earth. And I want to make those decades great. I want to make them peaceful. I want to make them content. And I want to be the best me that I can inside of those decades. So for me, my rubric is going to be very different than yours. And my rubric today is going to be very different than, it might even look different 12 months from now. But I get to choose that.
So what is your best Angie doing to age well?
Well, so a lot of it is her mindset. She's, not saying no with an essay. She's speaking her mind in very short and simple sentences. She's not being afraid to say, I need to rest. That concept of I need to rest is, I always equated rest with laziness in some way. Like, oh, I can't be tired. Well, yeah, I get to be tired. So a lot of it is in her mindset. I think the other thing that I'm doing hormonally is I'm not taking no for an answer, right? I'm kind of going through shifts myself in what I'm calling my third wave of menopause. And I thought I got to give my card back at 47. I didn't. And I left a doctor who had been my doctor for 25 years because I walked in with a list of new symptoms and I got the, that kind of sucks answer. And I thought, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to be dismissed. So I'm taking charge of that. I'm losing the things that don't serve me, people, circumstances, beliefs, stories that I told myself. And I'm taking care of my physical health. I'm prioritizing exercise and I'm trying to eat well, but in moderation. I don't cut out any kind of food group because life's too short and I don't want to deprive myself. But I'm prioritizing my physical health. And I think I'm showing up a lot better. I'm a better version of me now than I was in my 40s, for sure. And I also spent a lot of decades editing really truly the best parts of me out because I was afraid of what others thought, or I needed to keep the peace and I needed to be quiet and I needed everybody to be calm. I'm not editing those parts anymore.
Sounds like you're aging well.
Thank you. I feel like I'm aging well, and I hope to continue aging well.
So if you can offer just one piece of real talk advice for any women entering their 40s and 50s, what would it be?
Gosh, I think that I would want every woman to know that entering midlife, whatever that decade looks like for you, whatever set of transitions are coming, it's not a crisis. It could be clarity. I wish I would offer also the reminder that I wish somebody had told me that my body might change faster than my mindset, and that I wish I had lost a lot of the old stories that I listened about myself that others told and that I told, because those stories don't get the last word. I get the last word. Yeah. And I think I would just say too, don't be silent. Yeah.
So if the book is as full of good advice as this interview has been, I think it's a worthwhile purchase for anyone to buy. And so where can the listeners find the book and connect with the work you're doing?
Absolutely. So the book will be available on Amazon within days. The book is Real Girl's Guide to Midlife. You can always go to my website, realgirlsguide.com, for all the links to where you can buy the book. And then my Substack is realgirlsguidetomidlife.com. I write about 3 times a week, and you'll find all the links the second they go live. Believe me, we're on pins and needles here in California.
And don't be deceived by the title. I think it's probably a good book for men to read as well.
100%. I think it could be the real guy's guide to your, that should be like, AKA, also known as the real guy's guide to your real girl. And I think that that's been also something that's been so humbling to me, is not only how many women have emerged willing to share their stories, participate in, build our little Substack community that's almost 5,000 subscribers now, but the number of men who are diving into the subject matter. It's remarkable. And I love to see that shift. Because, man, if we don't know what's happening, and then we look at our male partners and expect them to know more than we do, we're doing them a huge disservice. We all have to learn here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially as you go through menopause. I mean, it's just such a confusing time for everybody. Even the kids.
Is. 100. And that's why, I talk about my mom's apology tour. And, I had no words to label what was happening to me at that time. And now I have words, and I owe it to my boys to just go, look, that time felt chaotic for you, and here's what was happening. It's biology. And I'm sorry, but also you're welcome, because I think educating our boys and our men and our partners earlier will make them better humans and more empathetic.
So what's the biggest message you hope women and men carry with them after reading Real Girl's Guide to Midlife?
Yeah, that you're not alone. You're not alone. It's not too late to make change and make shifts. And I think that, and the problems are not you. Anything that you might be feeling where you're struggling with something, you're not crazy and it's not in your head. These transitions are real, and don't take no for an answer. Yeah, I'd say that those would be the things that I hope men and women both take away from the book and and everything else.
Yes, I hope people will read the book and take all that important information away from it and, enter the conversation. I mean, we need to be having these conversations and not just kind of dusting it under the rug or, the women talking about it among the women and us men just kind of as soon as women bring up menopause, we cover our ears and run out of the room.
No, those days are over.
Yeah.
Those days are over. We have to get loud and we have to talk.
All right. Well, is there any real girl talk we neglected to include in today's conversation?
No, I mean, you hit it all. And I feel so honored that you invited me on. And it's been such a fun process for me. I've never written a book before, so it's been fun and exciting. And, I'm just so blessed to have built this community. And I hope we all just get to keep talking and just get a little bit smarter and wiser as we age well.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on writing the book and not only writing it but getting it published, because sometimes the writing part can be easy, but it's getting the published part and then just getting it out to everybody and getting it on their bookshelf. So best of luck with the release of the book. We will have links to all that in the description notes. And I just have loved this conversation. We had a little technical difficulty in the middle, but we got through it. And we persevered, and I'm just glad that we've had this time today, and just keep doing what you're doing, keep being real, and keep aging well.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Aging Well podcast. Please like, subscribe, or follow, and share this episode with a friend. And be sure to visit the affiliate links in the description below. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep aging well.